Monument Circle's golden glow pierced the morning mist as the white river shimmered beyond glass walls, painting the penthouse in soft, uneasy light. Elliot Grayson, usually the giant behind a tech empire, sat hunched in his silk robe, skin faded, hands trembling, eyes darkened by endless nights. 20 of America's finest physicians filled the grand room. White coats, anxious voices, clipped arguments that bounced off polished oak floors and modern art. Scans and charts lay scattered on the marble table, but no one brought hope. Not one diagnosis stuck. Not one prescription soothed. Fatigue clung to Elliot like a second skin, his breathing shallow, every glance heavy with unspoken fear. At the edge of this crisis, Lila Torres crept 40, shoulders squared, her dark hair tied neatly back, simple blouse and navy skirt immaculately pressed as she dusted a forgotten photo frame tucked behind crystal vases. In that photo, Elliot's late son Theo smiled, a memory sharper than pain. Lila watched the doctors, watched Elliot ignore the coffee cooling untouched at his elbow, watched the city awaken beyond the glass. Something in the billionaire's gaze said defeat was near. The debate grew louder, more desperate, the air thick with ego and panic. Clara Hayes, loyal assistant, paced behind the sofa, her eyes flicking from specialist to specialist, searching for a miracle. Lila set down her cloth. Her voice, steady, unmistakable, broke through the clamor. "I can heal him today." For a second, time froze. Stethoscopes stilled, jaws dropped. The world's most credentialed minds turned to the maid, sneering, scoffing, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Clara's lips curled in a skeptical frown, but Elliot's gaze, desperate, clung to Lila's. "What happened next will leave you speechless. Could a maid with no credentials outsmart the world's best doctors?" Elliot Grayson's penthouse rose above Indianapolis like a silent sentinel, an island of glass and steel perched on the city's pulse. Gazing down over the wide embrace of the White River, the mornings began with golden light crawling across polished oak, catching every line in the marble counters, glinting off bold strokes of modern art that seemed to fight for attention on vast white walls. His world was precision, every object curated, every reflection purposeful. From floor to ceiling windows, the city stretched, Monument Circle glowing faintly as cars slipped along silent streets, and the White River's gentle ripples mirrored the restless energy of early commuters. Inside, wealth offered no comfort. Elliot's empire shaped the city's tech future, employing thousands and driving innovation across industries. His name appeared on plaques, his signature in the glass facades of buildings crowding downtown. Yet all the power amassed over decades now seemed hollow. Elliot, 55, always sharp and composed, found himself hunched in a tailored robe, skin pale and eyes darkened by the weight of fatigue that no medical degree could explain. His movements grew slow, hands uncertain, a slight tremor betraying the strength that once commanded boardrooms. Each week specialists arrived from IU Health and Mayo Clinic, their briefcases stuffed with credentials, each promising answers only to leave with frustration. One by one the experts cycled through, the pulmonologist with his measured speech, the renowned neurologist searching for rare syndromes, the hematologist counting invisible failures in numbers and charts. Reports accumulated in stacks on a cherrywood table, every test narrowing the field until possibility itself felt like an illusion. Elliot endured their scrutiny with growing resignation, watching hopes rise and collapse in the measured tone of yet another negative result. No tumors, no infection, no precise diagnosis. His breathing slowed, color drained from his cheeks, and he grew sensitive to light, unable to escape a bone-deep ache that left him staring at the skyline long after midnight. Lila Torres swept the hallway every morning before sunrise. At 40 she carried herself with humility and quiet purpose, her black hair always pulled back in a neat bun, uniform pressed to perfection, shoes shining though the soles bore the miles of hard work. Raised in Horville's tight-knit blocks, she had learned from the age of 7 how to read a room without saying a word. Her grandmother, Elena, passed down wisdom older than the city's bricks, a blend of Mexican herbal knowledge and the intuitive healing that survived on the margins, trusted by those with little else to rely upon. Lila's hands were steady, her eyes sharp for detail, her presence unassuming, yet she noticed everything: the chipped handle on a mug, the faded family photo left facing the wall, the untouched cup of coffee that cooled beside Elliot's elbow, its rich aroma wasted each day. As Elliot's condition worsened, Lila saw the subtle signals none of the white coats could detect. She noticed the way he lingered by the window, fingers pressed against cold glass, gaze lost in the movement of water below. She observed how Clara Hayes, ever loyal, hovered at the periphery, monitoring every specialist's visit, her own eyes rimmed red with worry that never translated into complaint. In quiet moments, Lila would find Elliot's gaze drawn to a frame almost hidden behind trophies, a photograph of a boy, Theo, smiling wide, his arms around his father at some forgotten summer festival. Lila knew loss when she saw it. Her own family's story was a tapestry of departures: her mother's illness, her father's disappearance, and her grandmother's relentless hope stitched through every setback. This penthouse, for all its splendor, felt more mausoleum than home. The hallway echoed with the shuffling feet of experts, the clipped urgency of staff updates, the steady hum of machinery meant to preserve a life now slipping quietly towards something no technology could revert. Every appointment followed a script: blood work, exams, long talks ending in uncertainty. Even Dr. Samuel Carter, the city's most celebrated neurologist, began to falter. One afternoon, Carter stood at the head of Elliot's bed, his voice stripped of its usual assurance. "Miss Grayson, we've ruled out every known cause. I can't explain this. I'm truly sorry." Silence filled the space where hope had briefly flared. Elliot thanked him with a nod, the kind offered by a man too weary for protest. As doctors filed out, Clara lingered, promising to chase another lead, her belief in the medical establishment beginning to crack. Lila dusted quietly, the only sound the soft swipe of her cloth against wood. She listened, always listening, not only for instructions, but for the subtler cries beneath the surface. She watched Elliot's hand tremble as he reached for a glass of water, pausing halfway, eyes closing in exhaustion. In the kitchen, Lila prepared chamomile tea, the kind her grandmother swore eased restless spirits, and left it on the counter knowing it would cool untouched. She thought of her abuela's stories, the time Elena cured a neighbor's fever with nothing but broth and prayer, the afternoon she bandaged a wound when no doctor could come. The world did not trust women like Elena, or like Lila, but they trusted each other. Elliot's empire continued its march, shares traded, projects advanced, board meetings held by proxy as his absence grew more frequent. From the glass tower the city looked unchanged, its rhythm unbroken by the struggle taking place above. Yet inside the air thickened with despair, every attempt at optimism undercut by new symptoms. Some mornings Elliot could not rise from bed, his voice once booming in the halls of innovation, thinned to a whisper. Lila began to see the lines deepening on his face, the fear in Clara's posture, and the subtle shift in staff who tiptoed around the topic of recovery. No one dared speak of death, but every action was shaded by its possibility. Lila, carrying her cleaning supplies, paused at the door to Elliot's study, watching as he stared at Theo's photograph. She wanted to speak, to share what she knew of sorrow and the wounds that refused to heal, but old lessons echoed in her mind. Maids should be silent, invisible, present only when needed. Still, her grandmother's teachings pulsed in her chest, urging her forward. She watched the doctors leave that afternoon, their faces marked by professional defeat, exchanging looks that said more than their words ever could. Lila stood by the window, the city's late sun casting long shadows across the room. She glanced at Elliot, his eyes unfocused, shoulders slumped, as if bearing the weight of every unspoken word. It was in that moment, as silence reclaimed the space, that Lila's resolve hardened. She would not let him slip away without trying. Moving to the edge of the room, she straightened her blouse, smoothed her skirt and took a deep breath. The fear of ridicule, the threat of dismissal, even the history of being ignored or underestimated, none of it outweighed the knowledge that someone's pain deserved to be seen, if not by doctors, then by someone who understood what it meant to watch hope fade. As the city's lights flickered on outside, Lila prepared to speak, heart pounding, ready to risk everything to reach a man who had spent years surrounded by people yet stranded in loneliness. Invisibility was her shield, but compassion was her calling. She would step into the circle, not as a servant, but as a witness to pain, offering what medicine could not. Have you ever felt invisible yet seen someone's pain? Share your story below. Doctors filled the sitting room with a white noise of jargon and anxiety. Pages of notes shuffled, and digital charts illuminated grim faces in the late morning haze. Elliot sat at the edge of a leather chair, suit replaced by his robe, eyes shadowed and restless, hands gripping the armrest so tightly, his knuckles paled. The debate had circled for hours, possibilities discarded, hopes snuffed out as new test results flashed on the large screen. Clara kept pacing, phone in hand, murmuring updates to a far-off specialist, her trust in science growing brittle with every failed theory. Lila stood by the entrance unnoticed as usual, mop in hand, gaze fixed not on the luxury but on the brokenness in the room. She'd watched this dance for weeks, how medical men gathered, voices rising, egos bruised by a case that would not yield. Her own life, measured in small victories and quiet heartbreaks, had taught her to see what pride could miss. She saw it now, the trembling in Elliot's fingers, the line of tension along his jaw, the silent plea for someone to name the pain inside him. An older physician began to outline a new hypothesis, but even he sounded unconvinced. Elliot's head fell into his hands. A hush fell as Dr. Carter signaled for attention. Nothing explains all the symptoms. We may need to reconsider everything, he said, words heavy with defeat. Lila felt the pull, that urgency she'd known since childhood, the nudge of her grandmother's lessons echoing through memory. She took one step forward, cleared her throat, and in the vacuum left by uncertainty spoke. Her voice cut through the static. You are searching the body for answers, but not all pain comes from what a machine can see. Sometimes, sickness grows from a wounded soul. Heads turned, first with annoyance, then dismissal. The youngest doctor laughed, and others exchanged exasperated glances. Clara's stare sharpened, a warning behind it, but Lila didn't waver. Elliot looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. What did you say? He asked, the edge of hope tinged with despair. Lila met his gaze. I believe you are ill because you carry grief that has nowhere to go. Since your son's death, nothing has healed inside. That ache, it spreads. The body listens to sorrow. A stunned silence, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Dr. Carter scoffed, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. With respect, this is a medical crisis, not a fairy tale. Grief is real, but it doesn't cause this. Lila kept her stance, recalling the warmth of a childhood kitchen, the scent of oregano and lemon balm, her abuela's soft hands guiding her over the mortar and pestle. In that modest home in Harville, the television rarely worked, but wisdom was never in short supply. Elena taught that sometimes suffering wears a mask, hiding as fever, hiding as fatigue, but rooted in wounds no X-ray could reveal. When neighbors had no money for medicine, she offered comfort, rituals, broth, and time spent listening more than lecture. Those evenings glowed in Lila's mind now, filling her with resolve. Doctors help when the body is broken, her grandmother used to say, but the heart sometimes it needs something else. Now, as the physicians smirked and turned away, Lila felt the weight of tradition at her back, pushing her past fear. She spoke not to them, but to Elliot. I know I'm just a maid, but I see how you don't sleep, how you can't eat, how you stare at your son's picture and flinch as if it burns. I lost my mother too, sir. The pain does not leave unless you find a place to put it. Clara interrupted, her tone sharp. We appreciate your concern, but Miss Grayson needs medical care. Yet Elliot didn't dismiss her. He searched her face, uncertain, desperate for any thread to hold. You believe this is about Theo? His voice cracked, the name spoken for the first time in front of so many. He died 5 years ago. I've tried everything, work, time, distraction. Lila nodded, stepping closer. Sometimes grief waits until it finds room. That's when it takes everything. Outside, autumn's breath swept through the city, turning leaves to gold and rust, swirling along the historic streets with a quiet energy. Sunlight flickered on the river's surface. Lila felt the urgency rise in her chest, the memory of candlelit vigils and whispered prayers in cramped kitchens, the hope that if you shared pain, it lost some of its power. My grandmother used to take me to the cemetery after my mother passed. She said the dead leave gifts for the living, if you visit with open hands. Lila glanced at Elliot, watching his fist tighten, a pulse beating fast under pale skin. There's a memorial for Theo, isn't there? At Crown Hill, maybe if you let yourself grieve, if you say goodbye, the illness will ease, Dr. Carter scoffed. Cemeteries don't cure tremors or bring back cell counts, but Elliot silenced him with a raised hand. For the first time in months, his eyes reflected something other than resignation. What would you have me do? He asked. Lila's reply came steady, sincere. Go to your son. Speak what you've never said. Allow yourself to mourn, to feel, to remember. Let the city witness your grief. An awkward silence descended, thicker than before, broken only by the city's muffled hum, filtering through thick glass. Elliot sat motionless, torn between ridicule and the faint shimmer of hope, weighing decades of certainty against the possibility that healing might lie beyond the reach of medicine. Clara bristled, but Elliot ignored her, lost in thought, thumb running over the seam of his robe as memories flickered behind tired eyes. Lila's suggestion hovered in the air, drawing out uncertainty, igniting debate among the men who prided themselves on logic and data. Some snickered, others shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to voice doubt yet unable to offer anything better. Elliot finally nodded, more to himself than anyone else. Tomorrow, Crown Hill. I'll go. He met Lila's gaze, a silent pact formed in the hush. As the meeting dissolved, physicians gathering coats and tablets, Clara stayed behind, torn between protectiveness and a strange, unspoken fear that the maid's words might hold more truth than all their science. Lila returned to her work, wiping fingerprints from glass, heart thundering with both terror and pride. She had risked everything, drawn a line that could not be erased. Outside, Indianapolis exhaled, leaves tumbling past monuments and shops, the city's old bones humming with change. As dusk settled in, Elliot remained seated, staring at his hands, uncertain if what he felt was dread or the first spark of hope since Theo's accident. Lila finished her rounds, quiet in her satisfaction, knowing the most challenging journey often began in the moment you allowed yourself to believe something different might be possible. Night fell over the city, headlights streaked along the river, and in a penthouse high above, the course of many lives shifted, shaped by a single voice daring to name what others would not. Would Lila's bold claim hold up against the weight of sorrow and skepticism, or had she offered the last gasp of hope in a room filled with broken faith? Doctors filled the sitting room with a white noise of jargon and anxiety. Pages of notes shuffled, and digital charts illuminated grim faces in the late morning haze. Elliot sat at the edge of a leather chair, suit replaced by his robe, eyes shadowed and restless, hands gripping the armrests so tightly, his knuckles paled. The debate had circled for hours, possibilities discarded, hopes snuffed out as new test results flashed on the large screen. Clara kept pacing, phone in hand, murmuring updates to a far-off specialist, her trust in science growing brittle with every failed theory. Lila stood by the entrance unnoticed as usual, mop in hand, gaze fixed not on the luxury, but on the brokenness in the room. She'd watched this dance for weeks, how medical men gathered, voices rising, egos bruised by a case that would not yield. Her own life, measured in small victories and quiet heartbreaks, had taught her to see what pride could miss. She saw it now, the trembling in Elliot's fingers, the line of tension along his jaw, the silent plea for someone to name the pain inside him. An older physician began to outline a new hypothesis, but even he sounded unconvinced. Elliot's head fell into his hands. A hush fell as Dr. Carter signaled for attention. Nothing explains all the symptoms. We may need to reconsider everything, he said, words heavy with defeat. Lila felt the pull, that urgency she'd known since childhood, the nudge of her grandmother's lessons echoing through memory. She took one step forward, cleared her throat, and in the vacuum left by uncertainty spoke. Her voice cut through the static. You are searching the body for answers, but not all pain comes from what a machine can see. Sometimes sickness grows from a wounded soul. Heads turned, first with annoyance, then dismissal. The youngest doctor laughed, and others exchanged exasperated glances. Clara's stare sharpened, a warning behind it, but Lila didn't waver. Elliot looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. What did you say? He asked, the edge of hope tinged with despair. Lila met his gaze. I believe you are ill because you carry grief that has nowhere to go. Since your son's death, nothing has healed inside. That ache, it spreads. The body listens to sorrow. A stunned silence, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Dr. Carter scoffed, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. With respect, this is a medical crisis, not a fairy tale. Grief is real, but it doesn't cause. Lila kept her stance, recalling the warmth of a childhood kitchen, the scent of oregano and lemon balm, her abuela's soft hands guiding her over the mortar and pestle. In that modest home in Hallville, the television rarely worked, but wisdom was never in short supply. Elina taught that sometimes suffering wears a mask, hiding as fever, hiding as fatigue, but rooted in wounds no X-ray could reveal. When neighbors had no money for medicine, she offered comfort, rituals, broth, and time spent listening more than lecturing. Those evenings glowed in Lila's mind now, filling her with resolve. Doctors help when the body is broken, her grandmother used to say, but the heart sometimes it needs something else. Now, as the physician smirked and turned away, Lila felt the weight of tradition at her back, pushing her past fear. She spoke not to them, but to Elliot. I know I'm just a maid, but I see things. I see how you don't sleep, how you can't eat, how you stare at your son's picture and flinch as if it burns. I lost my mother too, sir. The pain does not leave unless you find a place to put it. Clara interrupted, her tone sharp. We appreciate your concern, but Miss Grayson needs medical care. Yet Elliot didn't dismiss her. He searched her face, uncertain, desperate for any thread to hold. You believe this is about Theo? His voice cracked, the name spoken for the first time in front of so many. He died 5 years ago. I've tried everything: work, time, distraction. Lila nodded, stepping closer. Sometimes grief waits until it finds room. That's when it takes everything. Outside, autumn's breath swept through the city, turning leaves to gold and rust, swirling along the historic streets with a quiet energy. Sunlight flickered on the river's surface. Lila felt the urgency rise in her chest, the memory of candlelit vigils and whispered prayers in cramped kitchens, the hope that if you shared pain it lost some of its power. My grandmother used to take me to the cemetery after my mother passed. She said the dead leave gifts for the living, if you visit with open hands. Lila glanced at Elliot, watching his fist tighten, a pulse beating fast under pale skin. There's a memorial for Theo, isn't there? At Crown. Maybe if you let yourself grieve, if you say goodbye, the illness will ease. Dr. Carter scoffed. Cemeteries don't cure tremors or bring back cell counts. But Elliot silenced him with a raised hand. For the first time in months, his eyes reflected something other than resignation. What would you have me do? He asked. Lila's reply came steady, sincere. Go to your son, speak what you've never said. Allow yourself to mourn, to feel, to remember. Let the city witness your grief. An awkward silence descended, thicker than before, broken only by the city's muffled hum filtering through thick glass. Elliot sat motionless, torn between ridicule and the faint shimmer of hope, weighing decades of certainty against the possibility that healing might lie beyond the reach of medicine. Clara bristled, but Elliot ignored her, lost in thought, thumb running over the seam of his robe as memories flickered behind tired eyes. Lila's suggestion hovered in the air, drawing out uncertainty, igniting debate among the men who prided themselves on logic and data. Some snickered, others shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to voice doubt yet unable to offer anything better. Elliot finally nodded, more to himself than anyone else. Tomorrow, Crown Hill. I'll go. He met Lila's gaze. A silent pact formed in the as the meeting dissolved, physicians gathering coats and tablets. Clara stayed behind, torn between protectiveness and a strange unspoken fear that the maid's words might hold more truth than all their science. Lila returned to her work, wiping fingerprints from glass, heart thundering with both terror and pride. She had risked everything, drawn a line that could not be erased. Outside, Indianapolis exhaled, leaves tumbling past monuments and shops, the city's old bones humming with change as dusk settled in. Elliot remained seated, staring at his hands, uncertain if what he felt was dread or the first spark of hope since Theo's accident. Lila finished her rounds, quiet in her satisfaction, knowing the most challenging journey often began in the moment you allowed yourself to believe something different might be possible. Night fell over the city, headlights streaked along the river, and in a penthouse high above, the course of many lives shifted, shaped by a single voice daring to name what others would not. Would Lila's bold claim hold up against the weight of sorrow and skepticism, or had she offered the last gasp of hope in a room filled with broken faith? The next morning dawned beneath a slate-gray sky, clouds heavy with unshed rain, the air sharp with the scent of decaying leaves. Elliot kept silent as Lila waited near the private elevator, clutching her coat, nerves hidden beneath the firm set of her jaw. When he finally appeared, dressed in a dark wool suit, scarf looped carefully around his neck, his steps betrayed reluctance. Without a word they descended to the lobby, marble floors echoing beneath their footsteps, the outside world cold and restless. A black sedan slid to the curb, its driver recognizing Elliot with a nod, yet curiosity flickered in his eyes when Lila took the rear seat beside his employer. Indianapolis in late October showed its heart without apology, sidewalks littered with gold and copper, trees shedding their finery, wind curling around corners collecting stories along the way. The city moved with a specific quiet purpose, the kind that both comforts and unsettles, an undercurrent of memories stirring with each breeze. Lila gazed out the window, watching familiar streets slip by, old brick storefronts with faded murals, children's laughter echoing from schoolyards, fenced with iron, the sun playing hide-and-seek behind Gothic church towers. Elliot said nothing, shoulders pressed stiff against the leather seat, hands folded in his lap, gaze fixed on his reflection in the glass. They crossed the White River, its water shining dully beneath the bridge, and wound their way through historic districts toward Crown Hill Cemetery. Leaves swirled in their wake, some landing on the windshield before blowing away, each a fragment of someone's season. As they passed Monument Circle, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument rising solemnly against the overcast sky, Lila felt the enormity of what lay ahead, a journey not measured in distance, but in the weight of wounds long buried. The car turned onto West 38th Street, the city falling away, replaced by the silent majesty of ancient oaks and worn gravestones standing sentinel over generations. At the cemetery gates, Elliot hesitated, lips pressed tight, his chest rising with the effort to keep control. The car rolled to a stop. Lila thanked the driver and stepped out, her breath clouding in the chill as she waited for Elliot to follow. He walked with a measured, almost ceremonial air, shoes crunching on damp gravel, every step accompanied by the gentle sigh of wind through yellowing branches. Crown Hill's oaks cast long shadows over silent graves, the paths winding between monuments carved with names and dates fading into lichen and time. They made their way to a small plot, nestled near the crest of a hill, away from grand mausoleums, where a polished stone bore Theo's name, a single bouquet of wilted tulips resting at its base. Elliot knelt with difficulty, fingertips tracing the letters etched in granite, his breath hitching as memories surfaced, laughter echoing from a distant afternoon, the warmth of a child's embrace now lost to the cold. Lila stood a respectful distance behind, silent yet fully present, her own heart beating in rhythm with the pain unfolding before her. After several minutes, Elliot spoke, voice barely more than a whisper. He was fearless, always chasing the wind, never afraid of falling. His words fractured, swallowed by the stillness. He remained hunched, unable to look back at Lila, afraid of what her eyes might reveal. She remembered her grandmother's words, how grief grows heavier in silence, how speaking the truth, even in fragments, can begin to set it down. Theo left much behind. Sometimes the ones we lose give us a reason to keep living, not just remembering, she offered softly, her tone gentle but unwavering. Elliot shook his head, tears glinting, the anger in his voice raw. He was all I had left after Claire passed. I worked to forget. It didn't work. A long pause stretched between them, filled by the distant call of a crow and the soft rustle of leaves. Unbeknownst to either of them, Clara watched from her car across the road, worry etched across her features. She scrolled through messages on her phone, pulling up an old email from a former employer of Lila's. Words leapt from the screen, terminated for overstepping with clients, inserting herself into private family matters. Clara's suspicion deepened. She needed to protect Elliot, especially now when hope had made him vulnerable. After what felt like hours, Elliot struggled to his feet, wavering as another tremor passed through his body. Lila reached out instinctively, catching his elbow, steadying him. For a fleeting moment, he let himself lean into her touch, the smallest surrender before pulling away, regaining composure. "Thank you for bringing me," he said, though his tone carried a bitter edge. "But I can't do this. Not now." They returned to the car, the drive back laden with silence, city lights now flickering in the gathering gloom. Rain began to fall, streaking the windows, washing the day's color into blurred lines. Lila glanced at Elliot, his face set, jaw clenched, eyes trained on some invisible point beyond the glass. He would not meet her gaze, and she understood too much had been revealed, the wound too fresh to touch again. Back at the penthouse, Clara intercepted them, her posture defensive, eyes sharp with accusation. "Mr. Grayson, may I speak with you?" She handed him her phone screen aglow with evidence of Lila's past. "I've done some checking. Lila's record isn't clean. She's been dismissed from previous jobs for interfering where she shouldn't have. I'm worried about her motives." Elliot stared at the screen, pulse racing, exhaustion overtaken by a surge of anger and betrayal. He turned on Lila, voice trembling. "Is this true? Have you lied to me?" Lila's response was quiet, her face open. "I've never lied. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand. I only tried to help." His frustration boiled over, all the pain of the morning crystallizing into one sharp command. "I need you to leave, now, please." Lila's hands shook, but she nodded, gathering her things with dignity, moving past Clara, who watched with the satisfaction of someone convinced they'd done the right thing. The door closed behind Lila, the echo ringing through rooms filled with everything money could buy, and nothing that could bring comfort. Alone again, Elliot sank onto the sofa, body racked by another violent tremor, mind spinning with doubt. He stared at the city beyond the window, lights twinkling, river dark and endless, every reflection a reminder of all he'd lost. His heart ached, but now suspicion soured even the faint hope he'd carried. Doubt pressed down on him, heavy as the October night, and for the first time in years he realized how truly isolated he'd become. Have you ever doubted someone who tried to help? Tell us in the comments. Indianapolis wore its finest dusk as Elliot and Lila exited the hospital's front doors. An autumn wind carrying away the remnants of the afternoon storm. Clouds parted over Crown Hill Cemetery, letting the last gold spill over the endless rows of monuments, shadows melting into amber across the land. The city's heartbeat slowed with the fading light. River below winding through old neighborhoods, its mirrored surface gleaming. White River glowed like a ribbon of hope beneath the lengthening sky. Elliot inhaled deeply, steadier than he had felt in weeks. Lila at his side, her expression calm, almost radiant. Their car wound through quiet streets, where leaves tumbled in slow spirals, children's laughter floating from distant porches, the world feeling freshly scrubbed. Elliot watched familiar buildings pass, old brickwork and iron fences framing memories. He remembered Theo dashing along these sidewalks, a blur of motion, sunlight tangled in his hair. Lila sat beside him, silent encouragement in every glance, her presence easing the weight, pressing his chest. They arrived at Crown Hill as the sun dipped low, throwing cathedral-like shadows over ancient trees. The cemetery's gates welcomed them into a sanctuary both solemn and beautiful. They walked together along winding paths, boots stirring fallen leaves. The city's skyline loomed beyond treetops, monuments catching the sun's last kiss. Lila led the way, quiet but purposeful, pausing at a familiar grave, where bouquets of yellow tulips, Theo's favorite, waited in the grass. Elliot approached, breath catching as golden light painted the name he could never forget. He knelt beside the stone, tracing letters as if conjuring his son from memory, voice cracking with unshed tears. Lila knelt opposite, placing her hand gently on the cold granite, sharing the moment's gravity. For several minutes, neither spoke, dusk holding them in a hush, as if even the wind understood the sacredness of grief. Elliot's shoulders shook, years of silence crumbling, emotion rising from the depths he'd kept sealed. Lila whispered, "Tell me about Theo, what made him laugh?" Her question, so simple, broke the dam within. Elliot choked on words, but they came, halting at first, then spilling out with gathering strength. He used to pretend the backyard was an ocean, would leap from the swing, shouting he was a pirate king, always fearless even when he crashed. A watery smile flickered on his lip. Lila listened, eyes shining, drawing each memory out like a thread woven back into a tapestry left unfinished for too long. He once tried to build a rocket from kitchen pots. When it fell apart, he blamed the laws of physics, not himself. God, I miss his voice in the morning. Always, "Good morning, Dad," as if every day promised adventure. Elliot's tears fell freely now, the ache in his chest breaking into something softer, more bearable. Lila brushed his knuckles gently, grounding him, her voice soothing. "You kept him alive by remembering." Behind them, a soft commotion. Dr. Carter had arrived with Clara, alerted by staff when Elliot's absence became known. Carter's face betrayed confusion, suspicion, then shock at the transformation before him. Elliot, who days before could barely stand, now spoke with vigor, skin glowing with a hint of color, eyes focused and clear. Lila rose to meet the physician's gaze, steady and unapologetic. Sometimes illness lives in the heart, unshared grief poisons the body, healing begins with remembrance. Carter struggled to reconcile what he witnessed with decades of training. Clara watched, heart clashing between skepticism and awe, searching for trickery and finding none. Elliot straightened, offering a weak but genuine smile. "I feel different, stronger, lighter, like something left me here." He reached for Lila's hand, not with desperation but gratitude, his touch lingering, their bond undeniable. Around them, the world seemed to exhale, wind quieting, light softening. As dusk yielded to evening, a gentle warmth grew between them, unspoken but palpable, born from shared sorrow, mutual understanding, and the bravery of bearing wounds to another soul. Elliot's voice found a new steadiness. "Thank you, Lila. I could never have faced this alone. I think you've saved me, not from illness, but from disappearing into my regret." Lila smiled, humility shining through pride. "You saved yourself, by choosing to remember, by letting go of silence. Grief divides, but love restores." As night settled, the city's lights flickered alive, windows blazing in distant towers, Monument Circle shining like a lantern. White River caught the reflection, hope shimmering over water, a promise renewed. Elliot and Lila strolled back to the car, not as patient and caretaker, but as survivors of the same storm. They paused at the cemetery gates, faces glowing with possibility. Something deeper than relief blossomed between them, a tender beginning, the barest hint of romance, built not on fantasy, but respect and genuine connection. Carter watched from the path, mind racing to make sense of what conventional wisdom could not explain. He turned to Clara, voice hushed. "Perhaps there's more to healing than what we know. Perhaps the heart's wounds matter just as much." Clara's only reply was a nod, tears bright in her eyes, the skepticism that had long shielded her from disappointment finally melting. As the last light faded, Elliot took one final look at Theo's grave, a gentle smile on his lips. "I'll visit again, not to mourn, but to remember, to honor what we shared." Lila squeezed his shoulder, a silent promise in her touch. They stepped into the soft blue glow of evening, footsteps light, hearts unburdened. What memory would you share with someone you've lost? Snow dusted the city, flakes drifting down in lazy spirals, softening the sharp lines of downtown, cloaking alleys and broad avenues alike. Indianapolis wore winter with understated grace. Monument Circle blanketed in white like a whispered promise. Trees adorned with crystal lace, lamplight shimmering on icy sidewalks. Inside Elliot Grayson's penthouse, warmth glowed from the hearth, but uncertainty lingered in every room, an undercurrent beneath the stability he'd begun to feel since returning from Crown Hill. Each day brought subtle improvements, steady hands, deeper breaths, a color in his cheeks that no doctor's prescription had ever restored. Physicians came and went, their bewilderment growing with every healthy test result, unable to reconcile months of decline with this sudden recovery. Elliot himself struggled to accept the change, moving through his home with a sense of cautious gratitude. Mornings began with coffee steaming in his cup, sipped beside panoramic windows as dawn crept over the frozen river. The world outside glittered, untouched snow transforming familiar streets, their hard edges blurred. Clara kept the schedule tight, appointments and calls arranged as always, her demeanor brisk, yet softer, as if some part of her too wished to believe in the impossible. Lila returned to her duties discreetly, blending into the rhythm of the household, her steps light, presence reassuring but never intrusive. She polished brass fixtures, set out fresh flowers and made sure every detail reflected care, rather than extravagance. It was Elliot who broke the silence one afternoon, his voice strong, gaze steady as he found her dusting the grand piano. "Lila, I'd like you to help me with something. I'm starting a foundation, focused on families battling loss and invisible wounds, grief, fear, loneliness. I need someone with compassion, not just credentials." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by quiet resolve. "If you're certain, I would be honored." Excitement pulsed beneath Elliot's words as he described his vision, a network of support for those lost in sorrow, blending practical aid with the kind of emotional understanding only lived experience could offer. Lila listened, her heart swelling with hope, believing that together they might build something lasting, a legacy worthy of Theo's memory, her grandmother's wisdom, and all the pain they'd both survived. For a moment, winter's hush felt less oppressive, replaced by the warmth of shared purpose. Yet beneath the surface, old doubts stirred. Clara, loyal and protective, could not ignore the shadow trailing Lila's story. She moved with new determination, digging into records, speaking quietly with former employers, piecing together fragments that painted a complicated picture. Late one evening, as snow deepened outside, she knocked on Elliot's office door, laptop tucked beneath her arm. "May I speak with you privately?" Elliot set aside his work, gesturing for her to enter. She opened files, scrolling through reports, her voice steady but troubled. "There's something you should know. Lila was involved in a trespassing incident, charges dismissed, but the record remains. She entered a home without permission, claiming she was helping a grieving family. There are other notes, concerns raised about boundaries, emotional involvement beyond her role." Elliot listened, pulse quickening, hope clouded by suspicion. Why did no one mention this before? Clara met his gaze, unwavering. "Perhaps because it's complicated. Compassion is good, but trust must be earned." Later that night, Elliot called Lila to his study. Snow fell in thick sheets beyond the glass, muffling city sounds, turning everything outside into a scene from another world. He waited as she entered, expression wary, as if bracing for a storm. "Clara showed me your record," he began, measured but not unkind. "I want to believe in what we've built, but I need to know the truth. Why didn't you tell me?" Lila's eyes darkened, pain flickering, but she stood her ground. "I have never hidden my... When that family lost their son, no one came. I brought food, cleaned and listened to their stories. I broke the rules because compassion demanded it, not ambition. Every warning on that file is rooted in caring too much." Elliot weighed her words, memories of his sorrow echoing in her defense. He recalled the emptiness after Theo's funeral, the silence no one dared to fill, the well-meaning friends who vanished when tears lasted too long. Still, he felt a tremor of fear. What if trust misplaced led to heartbreak again? He pressed on, voice soft. "Can you promise me your loyalty isn't just pity, that you're not drawn to my pain for reasons of your own?" Lila's answer came without hesitation. "I am here because I understand what it means to be invisible, to hurt in silence. My only motive is to help, not to heal wounds that can never be mine." A heavy pause settled between them, winter's hush mirrored in their unspoken doubts. Outside, the city glowed beneath snowy silence, every light softened, every edge blurred, uncertainty stretching as far as the horizon. Elliot's mind spun. Was it possible for compassion to coexist with boundaries, for trust to bloom without fear of betrayal? Lila's steady presence calmed him, yet caution remained, woven through every hope. Days passed. Foundation plans moved forward in fits and starts, Elliot alternating between inspiration and anxiety. Doctors declared him an anomaly, records marked with question marks where explanations should have stood. Lila continued her work, sometimes catching Elliot's gaze across a crowded room, both wondering if the fragile bridge between them would hold. Clara hovered, vigilant but less rigid, her faith in evidence shaken by the miracle she could not explain. Indianapolis settled into deep winter, snow piling atop silent cars, rivers frozen beneath layers of ice, laughter echoing faintly from distant neighborhoods, where hope had not entirely vanished. Elliot walked the length of his home each evening, considering the future, weighing every decision in the hush left by Theo's absence. Trust and fear waged a silent war in his chest, neither yielding, each demanding sacrifice. The city's heartbeat pulsed beneath layers of white, possibility and risk entwined beneath the snow. Elliot stood at his window, watching flakes swirl beyond the glass. The world outside blurred yet beautiful. In the stillness only one certainty remained. The choice between doubt and belief would shape everything that followed, for himself, for Lila, for all those who would seek refuge beneath the banner of healing. Would trust win, or would fear keep him captive? Only time would tell, as Indianapolis dreamed beneath its blanket of snow, hope flickering, uncertainty never far behind. Morning in Hawville brought a gentle brightness, sunlight spilling over snow-dusted rooftops, warming the modest row houses in soft gold. Elliot stepped from his car, coat buttoned tight against the chill, breath rising in thin clouds. He carried no security, no airs, only a tremor of nerves in his hands, a humility new to him, the weight of unfinished business settling over his shoulders. Lila's address was scribbled on a slip of paper, his knuckles rapping quietly on her faded blue door. From inside came the shuffle of slippers, a voice calling. Just a minute, then the door creaked open, revealing Lila in a knit sweater and worn jeans, hair loose for the first time, her face open in cautious surprise. He offered a hesitant smile. "May I come in?" She nodded, stepping aside, ushering him into a world utterly unlike the penthouse above Monument Circle. The tiny living room was filled with warmth, the scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee mingling with the sharper tang of winter air. Family photographs lined the walls, black and white portraits, cousins at birthdays, her mother cradling Lila as a baby, Elena standing proud in her garden, arms full of tomatoes and marigolds. On a table lay a battered cookbook, pages filled with notes in looping Spanish and English script, corners smudged with flour and hope. Sunlight pooled on the faded carpet, dust motes swirling in its beam. Elliot took it all in with a sense of reverence, hands folded, voice soft. "I should have come sooner. I owe you an apology, Lila. I let fear get in the way, fear of being hurt again, fear of trusting what I couldn't explain." She met his gaze, sadness passing like a shadow, then replaced by compassion. Pain changes. Sometimes it hides even the best parts of who we are. My grandmother always said the heart closes to survive, but healing asks us to risk opening again. Elliot nodded, humbled. Losing Theo, then doubting you. It felt safer to pull away than face losing someone twice. But I was wrong. A gentle silence fell, broken only by the ticking of a kitchen clock and the distant sound of children playing in the street. Lila poured coffee, passing him a mug, her hands steady despite the emotion shimmering in her eyes. "You showed me kindness when you could have sent me away for good. I never wanted anything from you but the chance to help." Elliot's voice found new strength. "What you gave me was more than help, Lila. You gave me back my life and the courage to remember, not just survive." The words carried the weight of transformation, the ache of what was lost, and the fragile promise of something new. Their reconciliation held no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, only the quiet honesty that marks true healing. As the morning wore on, they spoke of childhood, loss, and the longing to build something meaningful. Ideas blossomed between them, possibility growing with every shared memory. By noon, plans took shape, a foundation bearing both their names, a mission to reach those left behind by grief, to blend the best of science and soul, to offer hope where medicine alone fell short. The Grayson Torres Healing Foundation launched its first event on a bright Saturday, banners fluttering in the winter breeze outside a bustling community center. Inside, volunteers moved with purpose, tables stacked with homemade food, counselors ready with open arms, children weaving between legs as parents lingered in quiet conversation. Lila welcomed families with gentle hugs, listening as mothers and fathers spoke of missing loved ones, dreams interrupted by sorrow. Elliot shook hands, his presence a comfort, not a spectacle, moving among the crowd as an equal, not a benefactor. A grieving family arrived late, a woman and her 2 sons, faces drawn with fatigue. Lila guided them to a corner, pouring soup, handing out tissues, sharing memories of her own mother's past. Elliot sat with the boys, listening to stories of baseball games and bedtime jokes, their father's laughter now only an echo. He spoke softly, not as a billionaire, but as a man who understood what it meant to lose everything and still search for life. By afternoon's end, smiles returned, tears dried, warmth settling where only cold had lingered before. Outside, snow continued to fall, softening the city's edges, every flake a small promise of renewal. The foundation's first event became more than outreach. It became testimony to the power of compassion, to the possibility of healing in unexpected places. The city's heartbeat pulsed through its people, a current of resilience flowing from block to block, echoing within every soul brave enough to share pain, risk, trust, and begin again. That evening, Elliot and Lila returned to Crown Hill Cemetery, the sun setting in a blaze of tangerine and rose. Together they walked the winding path, boots crunching softly, air crisp with hope. They paused at Theo's memorial, the stone now surrounded by fresh tulips and notes from families touched by the foundation's kindness. Elliot traced his son's name, a bittersweet smile crossing his lips, peace settling where agony once held sway. Lila stood beside him, her presence a balm, her silence companionable, her heart full. For a long moment, neither spoke. They stood in the hush, sharing breath, honoring both loss and the love that survived it. The city below flickered to life, lights shimmering on the river, the pulse of community stronger than isolation, warmth defying even the longest winter. Elliot turned to Lila, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for everything, for believing when I could not, for teaching me to risk hope again," Lila answered with a gentle touch to his shoulder. "Healing belongs to those who dare seek it, wherever it may be found. Have you found healing in unexpected places? Tell us below." A hush lingered over Indianapolis as winter deepened, moonlight painting rooftops in silver, riverside trees shimmering beneath delicate frost. In every neighborhood, echoes of laughter and grief wove together, a tapestry both fragile and strong, stitched by the stories of those who dared hope after loss. The city, known for its steel and ambition, now glowed softly in the hush of night. Each window a lantern against the darkness, each heartbeat a testament to resilience. Elliot Grayson stood before the window in his penthouse, the city's pulse flickering below, hand resting on the glass. The world had shifted in ways no fortune or expertise could have predicted. Recovery was never just about medicine. It was the silent surrender to trust, the willingness to risk heartbreak for the sake of connection. He remembered standing at the edge, convinced healing was a fantasy, until the courage of one humble maid opened a door long shut by sorrow. The Lila Torres Healing Foundation had grown from a single idea, born in pain, nurtured by compassion, into a living, breathing force across Indianapolis. No longer confined to one grand house, its reach extended into schools, churches, clinics, and kitchens. Teams visited homes where grief once ruled, carrying warmth and understanding, meals shared, hands held, memories honored. Elliot no longer viewed his resources as walls to keep out the world, but as bridges to those most in need of hope. Lila became a quiet legend in the city's heart. Residents spoke her name with respect, stories of her grandmother's wisdom circulating through neighborhoods old and new. The recipe book sat open at every event, its pages dog-eared, sacred, a manual for comfort as much as healing. Children smiled, mothers wept, fathers rediscovered their voices, all because a stranger cared enough to listen, to acknowledge wounds that had long gone unseen. The foundation's events became havens where nobody remained invisible. Volunteers distributed blankets, teachers led circles of remembrance, and counselors blended practical advice with gentle encouragement. Every family found space to share their unique journey, knowing judgment would never cross the threshold. The city's heartbeat pulsed not just through its commerce, but through every act of compassion sparked by Elliot and Lila's partnership. Yet, the most actual change was quiet, personal. Elliot learned to move through his days without the anchor of regret. He kept Theo's photograph in his study, not as a memorial to loss but as a symbol of resilience. He and Lila often visited Crown Hill, sometimes in company, alone, always carrying fresh yellow tulip. Snow curled around the stone, petals defying the cold, a vibrant promise that love never vanished, only changed shape. In those moments pain became possibility, and the cemetery once feared, transformed into sacred ground for memory and healing. Lila too felt the city shift beneath her feet. No longer an outsider, her story became woven into the fabric of Indianapolis itself. Neighbors recognized her in markets, strangers greeted her with gratitude, her humility untouched by attention. She and Elliot, partners now in purpose, shared long walks by the White River, reflecting on how far they had traveled from invisible wounds to open-hearted acceptance. A single scene, more than any other, captured what they had built together. On a frigid afternoon, as snow whispered across the city, the foundation hosted a memorial for families touched by loss. Attendees carried notes, candles, and stories, gathering beneath bare trees. Yellow tulips were handed out, one for each memory cherished, each hope reborn. Elliot addressed the group, voice steady, gratitude shining in his eyes. None of us heals alone. Every kindness, every shared story is a thread that binds us. Lila taught me that sometimes the answer comes from where we least expect. Today we honor not just what we've lost, but what we still carry: love, courage, the promise of another chance. Lila, standing beside him, felt tears gather but did not hide them. She understood that pain and joy could exist together, that closure was not an end, but a door swinging open to something new. Snowflakes settled on tulips, sunlight breaking through clouds in a final golden blaze. Children played among gravestones, their laughter echoing into the cold, a testament to renewal, to the city's enduring faith in better tomorrows. Indianapolis sparkled under the moonlit sky, streets alive with possibility, homes sheltering stories waiting to be told. Through the efforts of two people brave enough to trust, a city found its voice, a foundation its soul. The journey from grief to hope, from fear to love, unfolded not just for Elliot and Lila, but for every life their kindness touched. Theirs was not a miracle, but a victory of perseverance, humility, and open hearts, a lesson that even in darkness, light persists. Now, as you reflect on their story, ask yourself, where have you found healing? Was it in a place you never expected? A kind word, a gentle hand, the courage to share your pain. Your story matters. Your hope can inspire others. Share it below. Someone else may be searching for the comfort you now hold. If this tale moved you, if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives, don't let the story end here. Subscribe now, like and leave a comment with your journey of healing. Each response strengthens the thread. Each voice enriches the tapestry of our community. Let's build a network of support that shines as brightly as Indianapolis under winter's spell. And as one chapter closes, another waits to begin. Click the image on your screen for another tale of hope, one that will leave you stunned, inspired, and hungry for more. Don't miss the next unforgettable story. Subscribe now, like and share how love has healed you.